Bitcoin has crashed more than 70% multiple times, and yet somehow people are still asking the wrong question about it. Nobody who tells you Bitcoin is going to zero actually believes it. Not the anonymous account with the skull emoji in your comments. Not the finance professors who have been calling it a bubble since it cost less than a cup of coffee. Not even the loudest crypto skeptics on television, who somehow never quite say the word zero out loud when the cameras are rolling. Right now, somewhere in this country, there is a woman on her lunch break, checking her phone, watching a number she can't unsee, and quietly deciding not to mention it to her family tonight. There is a man in his garage running a rack of mining machines, doing arithmetic on his electricity bill instead of thinking about the price at all. Neither one of them is going to get an honest answer today, because will it go to zero is the comfortable question. It has a comfortable answer, and everyone's selling you something: the bulls, the bears, the guy with the course. The guy with the doom video would rather you keep asking it forever. So let's actually answer the real question instead. Not the emotional version, the mechanical one. And here's the line to remember for the next 20 minutes. Zero isn't the real risk. Bitcoin has fallen hard before. Every serious downturn in its history has wiped out somewhere between 2/3 and 9/10 of its value from the top. That is simply the pattern of a young, volatile asset finding its footing. And every single time, the people who declared it finished were, at least so far, wrong. That is a real historical pattern. But here's the part almost nobody says next. A pattern repeating for 10 years does not prove it will repeat an 11th time. It only proves that betting against it has been a losing bet, up until now. Those are two very different sentences, and the entire industry survives by blurring them together. Picture a coin flip that has landed on heads 9 times in a row. Somewhere in your gut, you start expecting heads again. That feeling has a name, and it is not analysis, it's a pattern our brains build automatically, whether the evidence supports it or not. Long strings of it always bounces back, create the same feeling in investors. It's comforting. It's also not a guarantee. Now picture the actual mechanics of what could genuinely break something like Bitcoin. Because there are really only a handful of realistic pathways, and walking through all of them honestly is more useful than picking one and shouting about it. The first pathway is the one people imagine in movies: some technical failure, a successful attack, the network simply stopping. This is the least likely path by a wide margin. A blockchain that has been running continuously for over 15 years, defended by enormous amounts of computing power spread across the planet, does not fail quietly. Attacking it seriously would cost more money in hardware and electricity than most attackers could ever recover. If you're waiting for Bitcoin to break because the code stops working, you may be waiting a very long time. Cross that one off. The second pathway is less dramatic and far more realistic. The people holding it simply decide to sell, all at once, for reasons that have nothing to do with belief. Picture 3 different types of holders. An investment fund that manages other people's retirement money. A mining company paying real electricity bills every single month, whether the price is up or down. And a public company that borrowed money specifically to buy the asset, betting the price would keep climbing to justify the loan. None of these 3 groups are religious believers in the technology. They are businesses. And businesses sell when the spreadsheet tells them to, regardless of how they feel about the future. When a mining company's costs exceed what mining actually pays out, the machines get sold or the coins get sold not because the operator lost faith, but because payroll is due on Friday. When a fund faces a wave of investor withdrawals, it sells to meet those withdrawals, whether or not the fund manager personally still likes the asset. This is the boring, unglamorous kind of selling pressure that never makes headlines, and it can quietly outweigh all the passionate believers combined. Here's a pattern interrupt worth sitting with. Imagine a swimming pool with 3 separate drains, and for years, only 1 or 2 were ever open at the same time. The moment all 3 open together, the water level drops fast, not because anyone panicked, but because plumbing doesn't have emotions. Plumbing has a schedule. That's closer to what a modern downturn in this asset actually looks like than the old image of a crowd screaming and hitting sell out of fear. The third pathway is reputational. And it's the one the internet loves the most. The idea that enough respected, credentialed people calling something dead eventually makes it true. Except history keeps mocking this exact bet. If you had put a small, fixed amount of money into this asset every single time a well-known skeptic publicly declared it finished, over more than a decade, you would today be sitting on a genuinely absurd return into the millions, from a total investment smaller than a used car. That is not an argument that the skeptics are wrong about the future. It is proof that being confidently early and being confidently wrong look absolutely identical from the outside, right up until they don't. You cannot tell them apart in real time. That is not a flaw in your thinking. That is simply the situation everyone is in, always, with every unproven idea. But here's the one risk almost nobody is paying attention to, and it's not any of the 3 pathways we just covered. Stay with me, because this is where most investors get it completely wrong. The 4th pathway barely gets discussed because it doesn't fit neatly into a headline, a slow-motion structural problem years away that nobody currently owns the responsibility for solving. Every serious long-term technology has one of these. For an asset whose entire pitch is mathematical permanence, the honest long-term risk isn't a dramatic collapse. It's a distant, unglamorous problem involving future computing power potentially undermining old security assumptions, one that engineers are already quietly working to patch years in advance. Nobody knows exactly when it becomes urgent. Everybody agrees it's worth solving early rather than late. It will never trend on social media, and it is arguably more important than everything that does. So walk back through all 4. Technical failure extremely unlikely. Structural selling from big, unemotional holders real, ongoing, already happening in the background right now. Reputational death by 1,000 wrong predictions historically has not worked, though that alone guarantees nothing about tomorrow. A slow-moving future technical challenge, real, distant, being actively addressed. Add them up honestly, and this goes to 0 stops looking like the realistic outcome. But, and this is the actual point of this entire video, it doesn't go to 0, was never the reassurance people think it is. Because here's the reframe nobody puts in a thumbnail, and it's the whole reason we started with that line earlier. 0 isn't the real risk. Even one of the asset's most committed public skeptics, when pushed to actually put a number on it instead of just saying 0, predicted something different, not 0. A number so close to 0 that for a normal investor, it would feel identical to 0, while technically, on paper, the asset would still exist, still trade, still get covered on the news. Think about how strange that is for a second. Even the harshest critics are not really betting on extinction anymore. They're betting on something quieter and, in a way, crueler. An asset that survives forever, keeps a devoted community, keeps getting talked about, and simply never pays back the people who bought it during the excitement. That is the actual risk, not the dramatic one, the boring one. An investment that doesn't die, doesn't apologize, doesn't collapse into a clean, closed chapter you can walk away from. It just sits there, decade after decade, technically alive, technically worth something, while your money quietly fails to grow the way you needed it to. Picture someone who bought near a recent peak. Today, they are sitting on a serious paper loss. To simply break even, not to profit. Just to get back to zero loss, they don't need the asset to inch upward. They need a genuinely large percentage gain from here. That is a real, specific math problem, not a feeling. And nobody in their comment section, in their group chat, in their favorite influencer's video is going to do that math for them. Because just hold, it always comes back, eventually requires zero arithmetic, and feels much better to type. Let's make this concrete with a picture you can actually visualize. Imagine a security guard at a very expensive building, paid two ways, a fixed salary and small tips from people walking through the door. Right now, the tips barely register the salary is almost the entire paycheck. But this guard has a contract clause everyone signed up for from day one every few years. The salary automatically gets cut in half. Not because he did anything wrong, it's written into the deal. Meanwhile, the building keeps getting more valuable, and more people keep lining up outside wanting in. So one of three things eventually has to be true. Either what he's paid in becomes worth dramatically more over time, or the tips grow enormous enough to replace the vanishing salary. Or eventually somebody is guarding an extremely valuable building for almost nothing. Nobody, not the optimists, not the pessimists, has a fully satisfying answer to that puzzle yet. It doesn't resolve on any single day. It resolves slowly, over years, which is exactly why nobody makes a video about it. Let's zoom out for a second, because this exact pattern shows up far beyond one asset. And that's really why it's worth understanding properly instead of just picking a side and moving on. Every time something produces no steady income of its own, no rent, no dividend, no paycheck, the entire value rests on one single fragile idea, that someone else will want it more tomorrow than you do today. Raw land in the middle of nowhere works this way. Rare collectibles work this way. A slice of a private company someone pitches you at a dinner party works this way. The asset itself doesn't have to do anything for its value to move. It just has to sit there while human opinion drifts around it. Learn to properly evaluate one of these, and you've actually learned to evaluate all of them. Get it wrong here, and you'll get it wrong everywhere else too, just with a different name attached. Here's another pattern interrupt worth pausing on. Think about how differently the same fact gets reported depending on who's holding the microphone. A large fund quietly reducing its position gets called profit-taking by one outlet and loss of confidence by another, using the exact same number. A miner selling coins to cover electricity costs gets called capitulation in one headline and healthy market structure in the next. The underlying event never changes. Only the story wrapped around it changes, and the story is almost always chosen to match whatever the storyteller already believed before the number came out. This is worth remembering the next time any headline about this topic tries to make you feel something. Fast check what actually happened first, then decide how you feel about it, not the other way around. There's also a quieter, more human side to all of this that rarely gets airtime. A huge share of people who own a small amount of this kind of asset didn't arrive here through some deep study of monetary theory. They arrived because a coworker wouldn't stop talking about it at lunch, or a sibling seemed to be doing well with it, or the fear of being the only person left out of a conversation quietly won over any careful thinking. That's not a criticism, it's just honest. And it matters. Because decisions made to avoid feeling left out rarely come with a plan for what happens when the price falls. They come with a purchase and nothing else. The plan, if there ever is one, usually gets written much later, often during a moment exactly like the one this video opened with alone, staring at a number, wondering if anyone else feels this way too. They almost certainly do. They just aren't posting about it. This is why the entire zero or not framing is honestly a trap that benefits everyone except you. The optimists love the zero question because it's the easiest one in the world to win. Of course it's not going to zero tomorrow. Look at all this activity. The pessimists love it too because loudly predicting extinction sounds bold and rebellious, even when they don't actually believe it. Even when, if you corner them, they'll quietly admit they mean something closer to it'll disappoint you for a decade, not it'll vanish. Both sides get to sound confident. Neither side has to answer the three questions that actually determine what happens to your money. Question 1. Who is the buyer after you? And what exactly do they have to believe for that trade to work? Question 2. What specifically, numerically, has to happen for this to pay off inside your own timeline, not the internet's timeline? Yours. Question 3. If it survives forever but takes 15 years to become worthwhile, what did surviving actually get you? The woman on her lunch break went looking for an answer to the zero question and never found one worth having, because there isn't one. What she actually needed was much smaller and much more useful. To sit down once and write out exactly what number the price needs to hit. And by roughly when, for her specific situation to make sense, not hoped, not felt. Written down in plain numbers she could defend out loud to someone who disagreed with her. When she finally did that, she didn't panic sell, and she didn't panic buy more either. She wrote the number down and picked a date to check it again. That's not a dramatic ending. It's just the first time in months she was making an actual decision instead of quietly absorbing whatever happened to her. The man in the garage is still doing his monthly arithmetic, and his math gets structurally harder on a fixed schedule no matter what anyone believes, which he understood long before it became a talking point. And somewhere out there is always someone who bought a small amount years ago almost by accident, lost the details, forgot about it completely, and is now unknowingly part of the very scarcity story that gets used to justify everyone else's optimism, having contributed everything and personally received nothing. That's a strange, almost poetic description of how a lot of people experience speculative assets in general, not just this one. None of this is financial advice, and nothing here should be treated as a signal to buy or sell anything today. It's arithmetic and a long, honest look at how these questions actually get avoided. So here's what to actually take with you. You are completely allowed to look at all of this, decide you genuinely cannot answer those three questions with confidence, and simply choose not to have a position at all. Sitting out is not nothing, it's a decision, with its own risk and its own outcome, and it doesn't require you to correctly predict the future of computing, regulation, or anyone's investing psychology. And if you can answer all three questions out loud without flinching to someone who actively disagrees with you, then you already know what to do, and you didn't need a video to tell you. That's the real test. And it's worth saying one last time, because it's the whole point of this video, zero isn't the real risk. Everything else you'll see about this topic is just someone else's story about why the next buyer is definitely going to show up. If this kind of breakdown was useful, subscribe for more of this. We take confusing financial questions apart the same honest way every week. No hype, no doom, just the actual math underneath.